start this off then. Oh, brilliant. So it's Jenny from the Open Mind Therapist, and I'm really pleased to welcome Jerry back onto the programme today. Jerry and I met about 2.5 years ago, and we went through the whole, what turned into your book, doesn't it, Jerry? It turned into the book that you've now published called An Amazing Journey into the Psychotic Mind, Breaking the Spell of the Ivory Tower, which I know at the time, I've tried to write books. I'm still, 2/3 of the way through, but haven't quite got there yet. So I know how difficult it is. So can I just say...
It was brutal. It was brutal.
It
wouldn't have happened without Sherry. I mean, she's the one that, when I was ready to give up and go, this is too much. And yeah, we were like two people chained together, trying to get this across to people without scaring them.
Yeah.
Because it's pretty spooky.
Yeah, amazing.
And how should we say this? Or no, you can't say it that way. And she said, no, you can't say it that way either. It was just 2 years of that.
Yeah, it's like your worst nightmare, isn't it? It's straining over every word.
So we finally got it out. This is what it looks like.
Oh, you got a copy there. Brilliant, excellent. I did go in actually and see a review of it, and it looked amazing. The one person that I think wrote the review was talking about their own journey through psychosis, and just what an incredible support your book was for them.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of that. It's like, oh, thank you. We finally got somebody who understands.
Yeah. So let me just say a little bit about you, because I know we've done this before, so I want to try and obviously talk about your book, but I want to move it. I want to do a slight sort of curveball on our regular kind of interview. But basically, just for those that don't know, Jerry is a retired psychotherapist with 35 years experience working with the thought processes of the criminally insane and psychotic. And I know you've worked in psychiatric institutions all over the US. And I know you've received many awards, and you've got a master's degree in counselling from the University of Georgia, and 2-year study of PhD in psychology program. So obviously, you've got quite a credential, but you're retired. And I think that's the most important part, isn't it, Jerry, that you are now retired, which gives you freedom. So would you like to talk a little bit about what's made you speak up?
Well, for years, when I was investigating what the voices were, and things started getting very weird. At first, here's the psychiatric mafia saying, "Oh, this is a chemical imbalance, and that's what causes it." And I went to work back in the 80s at the biggest psychiatric hospital probably on the planet. There were like 10,000 patients there when I got there. This thing sprawled over 200 acres and had more than 200 buildings there. It was like a small city in and of itself. And, I was brainwashed by the educational system to believe that this was a chemical imbalance. And I watched what these medications that they were dishing out to these people had done to them. The long-term patients at the psych hospital, they were destroyed. Their minds were destroyed. They called it the Thorazine shuffle. They would just shuffle around because they didn't have a normal gait. Their tongues would be darting out. There would be jerky movements. Their nervous systems were destroyed by these drugs. And the pharmaceutical industry is going, oh, no, it's not our drugs. That's the schizophrenia that's doing that. It's the disease of schizophrenia, and there is no disease. They want you to believe it's a disease so they can pull their med. But what I saw was that if it was a chemical imbalance, that they weren't taking any measurements to see what in the brain was out of balance or by how much. And I found that pretty odd. I watched what psychiatrists did. They pull these patients into their office. They go, what are your symptoms? And then they go, okay, we're going to start you on this crap. And they wouldn't even tell them about the side effects of that stuff, at all. I mean, they go, well, it may make you kind of drowsy. You'll come out of it in a week or two. You'll start getting used to it. And they wouldn't tell them anything about the dangerous side effects. Nothing.
But I tell you something, Jerry. I mean, having been there myself, and that's why we've made contact really, because I was, 30 plus years ago, I was diagnosed schizophrenic. I was put on medication, and having been there myself, I mean, even if they'd have said to me, look, these are the side effects, it would have meant nothing to me because I was so not in this world. It wouldn't have meant a single thing to me, even if they'd told me. In fact, you talk about this in your book, and we talked about it last time, but that when they drug you up, the one thing you want to do is get rid of those drugs because they make you sick. They just make you sick, and you feel it.
The side effects are awful. They're awful, and almost everybody who goes on them eventually throws them away, and then they go psychotic again. So I was confused about that when I got to the state hospital because we were working in a psychiatric rehab center to not just stabilize these guys, but to stabilize them, train them in jobs. I was working for the Georgia Department of Vocational Rehabilitation in the Yarborough Psychiatric Rehab Center. So we were trying to train them in jobs, get them stabilized, and get them out of the hospital so they could be productive citizens. But in order to do that with the schizophrenics, they had to stay on those meds, and they all would go off their meds. Not only would they do that, they would sabotage themselves just as they were about to graduate from these programs. And I'm going, what's going on with that? So I started asking them because the staff had no answers. I'd ask them why they go off their meds when they know they're going to go psychotic. Oh, that's just a symptom of schizophrenia. That's what they do. They just do that. Nobody knows why they do that. They'd say, okay, yeah, the side effects. But from what I saw, the psychosis, the fluoride psychosis was much. As bad as the side effects were, they're awful. Having to live in a fluoride psychotic state where you're afraid somebody's going to kill you any second, and that everybody's plotting against you, and you're hearing voices and you're seeing things, and it's like hell on earth. It was much worse. So I would ask the students I was working with who went off their meds, I'd ask them, why'd you do that? Why'd you go off your meds? They'd say, all the side effects. So I'd have them write down all the side effects that they experienced. And then I'd give them a listing of all the symptoms of paranoid schizophrenia, like 2 pages worth. And I'd take back the side effects, and usually there were, 5 or 6 nasty ones on there. And I'd give them that listing of all the symptoms of schizophrenia, the voices, the nightmares, the seeing monsters, the paranoia, all the horror of it, and ask them to check which ones they had actually experienced. And then I'd give them both papers back, and I said, which one is worse? And they all chose 100% the psychosis is worst. And then I'm going, then why did you go off the medications?
Oh, yeah.
And this went on for years. And I just wouldn't stop doing it. I'm like, they got the answer somewhere. One of them has got to answer this, and 7 years it took. Until one girl, at the end of the time I was there, we were about to discharge her because she'd gone off her meds 3 times. And her mother called when she found that out. She said, please don't do that. I can't handle her at home. It's going to turn into a nightmare. I want to come up there. We'll talk to her. We'll see if we can't keep her. So she drives up from southern Georgia, and I met her one day. And the mother came in. I had her daughter, the patient, in there. And both of us are asking the daughter, why do you keep going off your meds? When you know what's going to happen. And it appears they seem to forget what happens when they go off the meds. It's just blotted out of their memory. It's like, oh yeah, it was bad, but it wasn't that bad. So both of us are begging her, well, why did you do that? You were doing good in your classes. You were making great grades. You looked like you were going to be a successful cosmetologist. Everything was going right. You almost had it knocked, and then you quit your meds and you go psychotic and you tear up the class, and now you're thrown out. And we're both begging her, why did you go off your meds? And she said, you won't believe me. And I said, well, try me. I've heard some pretty weird things in the time I've been working here. I don't think there's anything you can do to shock me. And she goes, well, the voices told me the psychiatrist was poisoning me. and they pointed to the side effects of the meds and said, listen, you're being poisoned. Here's the proof. And in fact, it's true. Those side effects are toxic, poisonous results of the medications.
The horrendous
Then
side effects.
Yeah. So you can see why they believed they were being poisoned.
Yeah.
Now, when that hit, I was like, boom, that was one shock. And then the other shock was I noticed from the time I got there that schizophrenics were beating up psychiatrists at a rate that was far and above attacking any other class of employees. The only class that was even close were attendants, and they were around psychiatric patients 24 hours a day. The assault rate on attendants was just slightly higher than it was on psychiatrists. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, what in the blazes are psychiatrists doing to piss these people off in 15 or 20 minutes a month that are warranting them being attacked? I just couldn't figure it. I sat in on some of the sessions with the psychiatrists, and I couldn't see anything that they said that was pissing these guys off. What they were doing was just doing what they do. They're dishing out these toxic meds. Then it clicked into place. The voices were directing these patients to attack the psychiatrist because those medications, as bad as they were, they calmed the patient down, and the voices didn't have as much control over them. So I knew the voices were connected with schizophrenia somehow back then. I didn't want to believe they were demons or anything. I thought they were part of the subconscious mind. I thought they were some breakaway part of the mind. And I believed that for probably 20 years until I got to the prison system. And
then you were freer, weren't you? You were freer to experiment a bit more there, I think.
I was a lot freer because, the psychiatrists at the state hospital didn't want you upsetting patients. And I was called up in front of psychiatrists twice, being told the voices are hallucinations, and what you're doing is making these patients worse by asking them about their voices, by reinforcing the reality of those voices. Which was hypocritical, because if a patient told a psychiatrist the voices were telling them to kill themselves, they reacted like, a stuck pig with a hot rod. They'd throw those patients in suicide watch, lock them up and keep them there until they weren't suicidal anymore. But anything else the voices said, forget it. They were hallucinations. So
the amazing thing is, Jerry, I've seen so many of your interviews now over this few years, because we did one ourselves, didn't we? And I think you were on Freeman Fly at the time, and then I saw you recently on James Delingpole, and I thought, oh wow, you were on Delingpod, and I heard the news story. Obviously, your book's come out. You're still talking about. Sorry, I don't mean to be unkind at all. I mean, you're talking about the voices and the fact that these voices are actually demonic entities that are in possession of people. Now, this kind of idea went out in the sort of 17th century. So, that's anathema. As soon as Descartes said, "I think, therefore I am," and that all this stuff just gets in the way. All this religious, spiritual stuff is a waste of time. We can't see it. It doesn't exist. Let's just focus on the chemicals in the body, and that's what we can work on. At that moment, the soul separated from science.
Yes.
And what your work is doing is bringing the soul back into science. It's bringing the spiritual nature of human beings back into the scientific discussion, even though you've now had to do it after you've stopped working. Because if you had have done it while you were working with it,
yeah, they would have fired me.
They would have fired you immediately.
No doubt. I got in trouble for schizophrenics recovering. They fully recovered. And when they found that out, I ended up in front of the medical director being threatened. And eventually they made things so bad. But at the prison, I had a lot more freedom, because if a patient went to one of the wardens and said, "Oh, the psychologist is asking me about the voices and it's upsetting me. I don't want to deal with it," the warden would go, "Get out of my face, man." That wouldn't even break the ambient noise level of that place. Yeah. So I surrounded myself with a group of prisoners for the rest of the entire time I was there, maybe 10 or 12 of them, who the agreement was I'd help them as much as I knew how, and they knew I knew more about the voices than they did. But the agreement was they had to tell me in real time what the voices were telling them in the therapy session.
Yeah.
You know, if the voices told them something, they had to tell me. That was the agreement.
Excellent.
So it got to where I suspected the voices were driving their behavior, and then it came to the point where I knew the voices were driving their behavior, and then it got like, okay, what can we do to interfere with these voices to break this up? And I started finding patterns.
This is where I want to go, because there's...
I figured you would.
Yeah, there's something really interesting and fascinating about the patterns. And it's really bizarre how, you know, over the years I meet unusual people like yourself who have gone beyond what we know about the mind and the science, etc., etc. And you've done your own research. You've found out for yourself. And it now turns out that you and I have been on the same page for a long time in a much bigger way than just schizophrenia and, you know, demonic possession, etc. So these voices or these patterns that you've noticed are actually playing out in society right now.
Which is very interesting.
Which is
very
fascinating.
Interesting.
So what I really want to dig into is, what are these voices, what are these patterns, voice patterns, and how are they reflected in what's going on now in 2021? So we're recording on the 22nd of June, 21, when we're in the middle of this full-blown kind of like deep state, you know, psychiatric mafia takeover of the world. And I just would be really fascinated to dig into the patterns and see how they marry up to what's going on through your eyes, how you see them.
Right. So, you know, for the listeners, this is like 45 years of research into what these voices are saying, and it's coming straight from the mouths of hundreds of schizophrenics, and they're all telling me the same thing. These patterns were the same in Georgia, you know, 2,000 miles away from here, as they are here in Arizona at the state hospitals I worked at here, the private psychiatric hospitals and mental health centers, and I ended up the last 10 years working psych crisis in the ERs of all the big hospitals here. These patterns, they're all saying the same thing. Hundreds of schizophrenics are all saying, these are the patterns these voices run. You know? So as you listen through these, compare these to what the mainstream media is telling you right now. I mean, there's a one-to-one correlation between what these psychotic voices are telling schizophrenics and what the mainstream media is filling your heads with right now.
Wow.
So we'll start with number one is negativity. I mean, virtually everything they say, the voices the schizophrenics say, is negative. You know, it's consistent. You know, they're consistently negative, derogatory, insulting, abusive, and destructive. They're also consummate liars. They lie about everything, just like the mainstream media. You know, they know eventually comes out. Although it may seem that they're positive helpers for short periods of time. And that's what they do. They come and they say, well, I'm Jesus Christ, and I'm here to help you, or I'm your guardian angel, and I'm here to help you. So they may play that role for a while till they get the patient hooked in. Once they get them hooked in, then they start turning into something demonic. So they've invariably turn on their victims, you know, just like, you know, Fauci. I mean, look at what's happened with Fauci right now. Oh, we're helping the human race. We got to get everybody to save them. We got to get them to take these vaccines. Now they're finding these vaccines are toxic and these people are getting sick. You know? So they're number one is they're always negative. You know, and if they're positive to any degree of time, that eventually turns. So the big question is, what is it that holds them onto a consistently unswerving negative path? You know, they're not random. Hallucinations are random. They're all over the place. They're positive, they're negative. You can't predict them. The voices are completely predictable. They're consistently negative, derogatory, destructive. You know, what holds them that way? What forces them and keeps them from becoming random? You know? So one of the main characteristics is they are negative. Another consistent characteristic is they are anti-religious and they are anti-spiritual. You know, they want nothing to do with church. They want nothing to do with religion. They want nothing to do with the Bible. And if you look at who was it? Schumer, I think it was, in our Congress the other day, somebody mentioned God, and he stands up and he goes, "God has no place in Congress." You know.
I thought it was God and country. I thought God was, underpinning the Constitution, isn't he?
Yeah, yeah. So you look at these people. I mean, they claim to be Christians, but then you see they're involved with all this child trafficking and all this kind of stuff. So they're fake. So they become volatile if the patient tries to move in a positive spiritual direction. They don't like it. They get what's found out in church. I mean, if the voices are weak and the person goes to church, they'll scream bloody murder all the way to the church. But when they get in, they'll shut up. Wow. If they're moderate in strength, they'll get in there and they sit there. And when the preacher starts talking, they start mocking, "Oh, the preacher, he's just doing it for money. Christ couldn't even save himself. What makes you think he's going to save you?" And they start prattling away and interfering where the patient can't hear what the preacher's saying.
But you said there's one prayer that they shut up for, and they don't like the 23rd Psalm.
Well, they don't shut up. They don't like it.
Right.
So they scream bloody murder. They don't like it. So not several, a handful of patients have told me that the voices react to the repetition of the 23rd Psalm, like they do.
The Lord is my shepherd; I shall not want, etc.
That one.
That's the one. I had to look it up because I have no Christian education, so I had to look it up, and I saw it, and I thought, "Oh, that's interesting. I wonder why that one in particular is so heinous to them."
Well, it talks about being protected by God. They don't want any of that. No. To them, God isn't real. They do not like that. Patients have told me that they react to that psalm in the Bible like worms thrown on a hot frying pan. Oh. So when I was working at the prison, a clinical psychologist sent me a book about somebody in the 1920s who was a dentist who would actually administer static electric shocks to schizophrenics, and the voices would shut up. His wife was a medium, and she would pick up on the voices and talk the voices into the light. And once that had been done, that voice had disappeared. Wow. So I tried that myself, and it did work. Mm. It's pretty odd, but it does work. But
sorry, Jerry. What I find with the whole anti-religious thing that's going on here in the UK, for example, is sort of don't trust in God, don't do anything faith-wise, don't do anything for yourself, just trust us. We know the answers, we have the answers. All of that other stuff is just hocus pocus, faith-based nonsense.
Well, there you go. That's the second aspect. Anti-religious. Don't believe in God, don't go to church, don't listen to the preachers, don't move in a positive spiritual direction. I know in Canada they invaded a church and tried to pull people out of there, and the preachers just went nuts and threw them out.
Amazing.
So you got the same anti-religious crap going on. So that's these things again. They're infesting these politicians, who've got control. They foster and create negative emotion. Look at what they're doing. Look at these newscasts. They breed anger. They breed anxiety. They bring paranoia, shame, guilt. It's all negative stuff. You're going to die of the coronavirus. Take these toxic vaccines. Don't move anywhere. You're going to catch it from your neighbor. Squeal off on your neighbor if he's not taking these things, or he's talking against us. Snitch him off, and we'll come and get him. And don't be out on the street unless we tell you to. I mean, so they're creating a negative situation. Now, these entities feed off of that negative emotion. That's why they instill it. So if you talk to schizophrenics, check this out for yourself. If you don't believe me, those of you who work with them, when the voices attack and induce that negative, fearful, paranoid state, they drain the energy from the patient. And there's a lot of patients who told me they can actually feel their energy leaving while they're being attacked by these voices. So you look at what they're doing. They're fostering this negative emotion. They're keeping people in a low vibration. broadcasting fear and paranoia and lies and shame and guilt, and they're creating a negative emotional state among the whole country. And over here they're doing the same thing. They're doing it all over the world.
All over the world, everyone is subject to this. People have been traumatized and placed into a state of mass psychosis.
Yes.
People aren't really living their lives anymore. They're being lived by these entities.
Yes.
People are possessed.
Who control these politicians and the power mongers, the Rockefellers, the friggin' Obama is a big one, man. It was Soros, the Rothschilds, all those, they're all infested to the max with these things. Wow. So they feed off of the negative emotion that they're creating. And I've seen that in the prison. If they can get these guys thrown in the prison, you walk into the prisons I worked in, you can feel it right away. It's like, man, no good deed went unpunished in those places.
I mean, if I can just interject there a minute, but with us that know what's going on, and we're very shocked and horrified about what's happening around the world because so many people are fast asleep, there is a tendency to err towards the negative side. Oh my God, it's all going to end in, we're all going to be killed, it's going to be terrible. So that is as bad. I mean, they're still causing negative shopping.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they're feeding on that. They're feeding on your fear.
So in a way, our job, those of us that know what's going on, is to try and get beyond that.
Yes, to calm it down and not listen to it.
Yeah.
Blot it out. Resist. Resist in whatever way you can. I've been thrown out of, I don't know how many stores now, probably 15. Just thrown out. They're like, "Where's your mask?" I'm not wearing no mask. Oh, get out of here. Okay, here's your stuff back. I'm out of here.
Wow.
If everybody did that individually, so you have to take, we have to take our control back. You guys are doing it through common law. We're doing it through our Constitution. The Arizona election here in this state where I'm at now, no doubt has been taken over, and it has leaked out how badly it was taken over. They're going to put out a formal report in August. But once Arizona falls, there's like 11 other states who've already come here seeing irregularities in theirs. And the deep state has thrown everything they possibly could, including the kitchen sink, to try to stop this audit. And recently they said they're going to send members of the Department of Justice down here accusing Arizona of being unfair to minorities. And the Attorney General said, yeah, you can come and bail them out of an Arizona prison. We're a constitutional state. We're driven by the U.S. Constitution, and you have no right to do that. You send your people down here. We are going to lock them up, and you can come and bail them out of our prisons. So now they got the National Guard surrounding the auditorium.
Wow.
Armed guards. That's how bad it's gotten. That's how bad they don't want this information to go out, because once it goes out, it's going to be bam, 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 state after state after state after state. The entire election is going, even with what they have now, once they declare this election fraudulent, the rest is invalid.
It seems incredible. It seems just completely incredible that it could ever be declared fraudulent with the amount of control and manipulation that is going on in the media. They have the majority of the minds of the people. How on earth can they ever declare it's fraudulent? And how will the mainstream media would have to be taken down?
Well, they'll shut up, because what's going to happen is when they bring this out, the mainstream media will not broadcast, and that'll be the end of it. They'll go dark, because everybody will know then. So they have supported this insurrection from the start. Billions of dollars of Chinese money has gone into paying off the mainstream media.
Jerry, are you a dyed-in-the-wool Republican?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Because once upon a time, I was a dyed-in-the-wool lefty, but up until about 5 years ago, or 6 months, probably a bit longer than that, I started doing my research, and I realised it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter left or right. What matters is truth or lies.
Yes.
And to be honest, they're guilty of both on both sides.
Right. See, this is a spiritual battle. This is good against evil. This isn't Republicans against Democrats. This is good against evil. This is truth against falsity. This is a spiritual battle taking place on a massive scale right now. And if you look, you've got the Christians are heading the charge. You got Lynn Wood out there actually accusing in public the vice president of child trafficking and child molestation, right in public. And he's a defamation lawyer. You know, if he comes out in public and he says that, he's got the information to back it up. And Pence has never come out and go, oh no, that's a lie. You know, he's come out against Obama and goes, yeah, Obama is involved with child trafficking and drug smuggling and and the Clintons. I mean, he's come out and he's exposed them all in public. You know, and they can't come back because he's got the evidence. You know,
amazing.
So yeah, the Christians are taking charge. Now, this is a massive spiritual battle taking place all over the planet right now. So these facets of the patterns that the actual psychotic voices run that schizophrenics hear, as we go through them one by one, you'll see this matches. It matches. So
they get louder after sunset. That's your next one. Number 5.
That's an interesting one. And you know, if anybody who's worked in old folks' home with geriatrics sees that they have something called the Sunbounder Syndrome, where they start getting crazier after sunset. Yeah, and that's kind of, you look at the mainstream media, you know, they come home at 6 o'clock news and they're all night, 10 o'clock news, you know. So that was an interesting facet. They get louder when they're ignored. You know, so if the patient tries to ignore the voices, which is what psychiatry tells them to do, oh, they're not real, they're hallucinations, don't, just ignore them. They get louder. And that's what the mainstream media is doing. They foster self-destructive behavior. You know, look at what these people are pushing. You know, lockdowns, isolation, take these toxic drugs.
Don't hug anyone. Don't kiss anyone. Don't
right.
Feet apart.
Right. Don't go to your jobs. Close down your businesses. You know, stay in your house. You know.
We know from I did some work with ME a number of years ago, CFS. We know that physical contact actually raises your immune system. If you hug and you kiss and you smile, it increases your immune system. So they're telling us to not do any of that and isolate in our homes. You know.
Yeah, that's another thing they do. They foster isolation.
Here we go. Yeah, number 8.
Yeah, the voices insert negative, paranoid, destructive thoughts into the thought system of their victim. These thoughts often consist of lies, such as people are talking behind your back, plotting against you, planning to kill you. Their goals are to destroy marriages, positive relationships with friends and others. The ultimate aim of the voices is to get the victim shut out from all others and isolate them so they have control of them and there's no interference with their agenda of generating negative emotion and sucking them dry of the negative emotion energy. So it's the same thing. This is, look at what the mainstream media is doing. Stay in your houses, don't hug, don't go to church, don't go to meetings, don't go to work. They're fostering isolation and then feeding us bullshit. You know.
And the crazy thing is, when you've got one part of a couple, the man or the woman, who's awake and the other one's asleep, you've got terrible, terrible discord. You've got this destruction of relationships. You know, most of my clients this last year are people that are going through the shock of awakening and their partner is fast asleep.
Yeah.
The fear of not having anyone to support you, because they've been wooed and seduced by this crazy narrative that was going on, and they believe it hook, line, and sinker.
Oh yeah, my wife's one of them.
Yeah.
I can't talk to her. She listens to the mainstream media. She thinks I'm a wacko. You know, it's like, they demand the attention of their victims, so you can't ignore them. So that's what the mainstream media is doing. The Chinese money, the Soros money going into the mainstream media. You turn on your TV set, right away you get blasted. Turn off the friggin' TV sets. That's how they're getting to you. Turn those friggin' things off. Do something else. You know, they maneuver for increased control over their victims. That's one of the things that the voices do. They're constantly pushing for increased control. And that's exactly what the politicians and the deep state are doing right now. They want more and more control. They're ordering people to stay in their houses, not go to work, to lose their jobs, to lose their livelihoods. You know,
we had, just to change the subject, well, not change it, but to add to it, we had an edict last summer that you couldn't have sex in your house with your partner if he came from another household, but you could in the garden. And then there was even another suggestion that you couldn't have face-to-face sex. You had to have doggy style. So
well, no. Can't people see what's going on? Can they see it? I mean, what is it going to take to wake people up? What is it going to take? What is it going to take?
I know.
Yeah,
well, this is the gaslighting. This leads us conveniently.
Yeah, the gaslighting. The voices they gaslight. They're pulling all these manipulations and tricks on you and getting you to believe that this is valid stuff. You know, it's what the voices do is they'll get somebody, you know, to lose their keys. You know, and then they go all over the house. They can't find the keys, and then they lose their grip, and then they find the keys somewhere in their house. And they believe that the voices did that. You know, so I've seen them do that with, I mean, they've done it with me while I was writing the book. It's like I'd write a sentence and I'd read it over and over and over again. There's something wrong with it. I can't see it. I can't see it. And then Sherry would point it out. And I'd go, oh, wow. You know, it was right there in front of my eyes. But no matter how many times I read it, I didn't see it because I was perceiving it in a certain way. And she pointed out, and it was like magic. Like, bam, there it is. Oh, that's what it, oh, I see it now. You know, so they're doing that kind of stuff. They manipulate perception constantly. They're capable of causing their victims to interpret situation and information coming in from the environment in a wrong or negative way. For instance, a schizophrenic might see a police car drive by in their house, and the voices immediately jump in and tell them, they're looking for you, they're looking for you.
The interesting thing about that point as well, the manipulating of perception, I've got some very old friends that go back many years who are very much in the system and very left wing, and they see me as being extreme right wing, almost fascist, and I have absolutely no affiliation with any idea of right wing. All I'm interested in is truth, but because manipulation, the perception of anyone that goes against the mainstream agenda is so strong, they think that you must be right-wing, fascist. Yeah. And the paradox is, the real fascists are the ones that are progressing this agenda.
Exactly. You know, they don't even realize it. They're blind. No. You know, it's like they have complete access to schizophrenics' memory. Okay, so here the deep state has complete access to everything you say or do over your phone. They can listen in on your phone anytime. They have your records of everything. They can check everything you've said or done. So they have access to virtually your entire memory and your entire life. You know, they pulled up Fauci. They pulled up all his conversations from his email, and they pointed out, yeah, you knew that what you were doing. You were lying your butt off when you said there were no therapeutics that work. You were lying your butt off when you said that chloroquine didn't work and was dangerous, you know, and you knew it because your emails are saying that you knew it. He's in big trouble now. He ought to be hung up by the nougats.
So that is interesting, because to have complete access to all of your data, right. This is where we're going, to have total access to everything from your medical records to your bank details, to your toilet habits, to your eating habits. That's where we're going.
Well, they already have it. They already have it. They know what you purchased from your credit card. They know what you bought. They know where you've been. They know what you said. They can turn on the microphone to your cell phone and listen to every word you're saying. They can turn on the video and see what you're doing. They can watch you through your television set now. You know, they've got all that already. It's got to be stopped. You know, we have to take control back from these bastards. You know? They demand that the victim not tell others about their presence. Oh. So just like the mainstream media is demanding that nobody know about what they're doing. You know, that all this slimy stuff, all the money that the U.S. government, Obama sent plane loads of cash to Iran. They're still sending cash to Iran. They're sending cash to China. This slush fund that the Biden, unfortunately, Democrats have control of the monetary system here, and they're just spending money as fast as they can. They don't have control of the military, but they have control of the finances, and they're destroying them as fast as they can. The inflation is going to be horrendous right now.
Interesting. Yeah, they don't want anyone to know what they're doing. So
No,
that's
they don't.
what the censorship is all about as well, isn't
That's
it?
what the censorship's all about. That's what the YouTube shutdown of all these sites are. YouTube has shut down virtually every alternative media site in this country, and they're all moving to BitChute and somewhere else, but they're not stopping.
No.
You know, that information, they're making it harder to get that information out, but it is getting out.
I mean,
Yeah.
just to interject there, you do know that the WEF is running a cyber attack, a rehearsal in July.
The W what?
The World Economic Forum is running a cyber attack rehearsal in July. Just to let you know, if you didn't know. So, you know,
Well, they've already shut down our pipeline on the East Coast. You know, they've said, oh, there's a cyber attack. And here's these multi-million-dollar companies. You know, you think they'd have enough money to you know, have decent protection from that kind of stuff. And then they're just taking their word for it. You know, where is the evidence of that attack? And then all of a sudden it comes back, oh, and they gave back part of the money from the extortion. It's all bullcrap. You know, now they're cyber attacking the meat industry here.
Yeah,
They're shutting down they're shutting down the, what else was it, food? They're going after the food industry. You've got,
the Ice Age Farmer. The Ice Age Farmer talks about that quite a bit, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Do you know him?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're consummate liars. The voices are consummate liars. They can't be trusted with anything. You can't make a bargain with them because you can't trust them. And that's just the same thing as these politicians. They'll promise you the sun, the moon, and the stars, and then when they get in there, they lie their butts off. They do what they want.
We've had, I mean, the lies in our media here, from our politicians here, have been monumental, absolutely monumental. You can compare one statement 3 months ago with the statement that they're just making, complete contrast.
Yeah, and they don't care. They're blatant about it. At this point, they're so blatant about it, they don't care. They're doing these things that are blatantly obvious, and everybody's like going, whoa, 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 but they don't care. You know, they feel they got it knocked. They feel like, okay, we're in control now. Yeah. But now they're scared to death over here because we're, you know, they've had their hands around our throats, and we're by finger, we're starting to pull it off. And more information is coming out now. And that information is damning. And they, you know, look at they've kicked the president of the United States off of Twitter, YouTube, any social media site. They kicked the president of the United States off. You know.
Let's hope they're hanging on by their fingernails. So what about the next one? Stunned by the shock of rubbing a rubber band on their wrist. That's intriguing.
Well, I think in this case, that does work. You know, because when I was reading that material about the guy in the 1920s who would administer the static shocks and the voices would shut up, I was trying to find something that would mimic that. You know, because it's almost like they have with the population. The voices almost hypnotize these people into believing what they're saying. It's almost like a hypnotic trance. So they forget to do whatever they're told to do. You know, repeat the 23rd Psalm, run these programs, run the That's a Lie program. You need to do this kind of stuff to disrupt the voices. Well, it's a very slippery psychological state, and the voices put them in a trance and just kind of get them hypnotized to listen to their bullcrap and their interpretation of reality. And they get so mixed up with that, they just can't break it. So when things start getting bad, they remember, okay, I got the rubber band. When the voices get bad, I'm supposed to snap the rubber band. They snap the rubber band and it stings them and it stuns the voices into silence.
Yeah, pattern interrupt.
Then they can remember to go back and repeat the 23rd Psalm or do the That's a lie program. Then they get their facilities back. So it's the same thing with the mainstream media. And the shocks are coming with the truth. Each time a major truth hits, it's bam, bam, bam. So you look at what's happening, like Comey has shut up, Brennan has shut up, Clapper has shut up, the Clintons have shut up, they've gone silent. Most of the Hollywood crowd have gone silent.
We've not heard from Gates forever. Bill Gates.
Gates is hiding. I hear Fauci is hiding. Gates has bought up millions of acres of farmland here in the U.S. And all over the world. Now he's testing vaccines in Africa again. He needs to be hung by the butt. You know, he's another one that's getting away with it. But yeah, the shocks of truth, the shocks of reality. Yeah, it's like they're staggered. You know, when you know, what's his name, Lynn Wood comes out and accuses the president of the United States of child trafficking. You know, it's like he shuts up for a while. You know, it's like, oh well, yeah, he doesn't deny it. He just stays out of sight for a while.
Did you know, Jerry, that snapping of the rubber band, that's what we use in hypnosis with hypnotherapy?
No.
It's called pattern interrupt. So if you get somebody to sort of imagine something amazing that they really want their life to be like, etc., and then you get them to go and remember what it used to be like. And the minute you get them to remember what it used to be like, you snap the rubber band and you bring them back into the, oh, this is how I really want it. And what it does is it makes an association with all the negativity. You're going to get a shock, yeah. And so it brings you back into this wonderful place where, no, this is how I want it. I'm never going down that road again. So the snap brings you back into that. So it's a well-established hypno technique. So
I didn't know that. There's one of the shamans I interviewed sent me a book where they were using hypnosis to get rid of the voices. You know, so they would have the person, especially with past life stuff, you know, and they were getting good results. You know, I'll send you the name of that book. I've read it. I don't know a lot about hypnosis. I know the basics, but they're getting really good results with
and you know something? We've always been advised, going back, by all of our professional associations in the UK, don't use hypnosis with schizophrenics.
This guy's doing great with it. He's doing great with it. Yeah. That's interesting. That's interesting.
Yeah.
You know, you got to feel relatively comfortable with who you're working with. You know, with schizophrenic, because there's some that are out of control. I mean, you know.
I did meet one. Sometimes because I was schizophrenic, I put my video up online. It's on my channel here about my experience. Sometimes I get people come through that want me to treat their children or whatever. And to be honest, I don't know how to treat schizophrenia. You are much better at that than I am. But I did have one young man through a number of years ago who he had been sucked into a different reality. He wasn't in this world. And he had been seduced by these voices into another world. And what I felt when I was sat opposite with him, I could feel the anger and the rage at me trying to help him.
Yes.
It was coming out in spikes, like the energetic spike.
I've felt it a million times.
Do you know what I mean? You can't even. I can't even tell you it was the way he looked or it was what he said. It was energetic. It was a feeling. It was like a stabbing.
Yeah. For me, it was an icky cold electrical feeling.
Yes.
And how strong it was told me how strong the voices were.
Yeah.
You know, and how angry they were. And there were times where I was working with people in the ER. Where it was so strong, I thought that it was going to break whatever protection I had. It was like whatever shield I had was like a billionth of an inch over my skin, and they were about to break through. And I always wondered what would happen if they broke through, you know. And it was like that crossed my mind several times. But yeah, what they don't like is being told, or the victim to learn, that they are parasites, just like the mainstream media and the Rothschilds and the banking system. They're parasites. They don't want people to know that they've been stealing their money, they've been stealing their lives, that they are parasitic entities that are feeding off the production of the people. And that's what's coming forth. And they're doing everything they can, just like the psychotic voices, don't want the patient to learn that they are parasites sucking their life energy.
There's a thought I have there about the gaslighting. They are trying to convince us that we're the parasites. Yes. Because we are using all the resources on the planet and we are the parasites.
Right.
The opposite couldn't be more true.
Exactly, that's what they do.
The good people of the earth just want to live a life, and we've been seduced by all these conveniences that we don't need. And who is scraping up? Who is, making all the money out of that? Who is exploiting the good labor of the people? And
there's too many people in the world now. We have to get rid of some of them because they're just consumers. They're just not contributing anything now that they have all the money out under their control. So it's the same thing as the psychotic voices. It's like they're after all the resources. They're after all the negative emotion. They're after all the money. And they have a good bit of power. And Trump threw that in their faces. Boy, there's been over 50 attempts on his life now.
Really? I didn't know that.
Oh yeah. They've tried to kill him every way they possibly could. Wow. But he's had the military behind him the whole time, so they're watching.
How did they let him get in? Do you think that was just, how did they allow him in? Because these people have it all planned. It was in The Simpsons 12 years ago.
Yeah, they blew it. They blew it. They fixed the election when he was there with Clinton. And he told Clinton straight up, he said, if I get in, you're going to prison. So they did fix the election, but so many people voted for him that they overwhelmed anything they could do, and it took them by surprise.
I have heard that. I've heard that.
Yeah,
I hope it's true.
It took them by surprise.
But it was predicted by The Simpsons. I mean, not that we should sort of use The Simpsons as any sort of real, social measure, but it was predicted.
It was predicted. It took them by surprise, and it was like Clinton went nuts when that happened. They said she was so hysterical that she was throwing things at people, she was hitting people, she was acting like a friggin' psychotic. But yeah, it took them by surprise. But this time, the massive cheating that they have put out is like unbelievable. It's not just one method of cheating. I mean, those machines were designed to cheat on elections in Venezuela. They were hooked to the internet. They could be programmed, even in the manual. You could look in the manual. They showed the manual. You could show them how to program what you want them to show. And the Dominion people gave out huge stipends. Use these and we'll give you all these millions of dollars. They paid off all these states to use their voting machines.
I want to throw a cog in the works or the spanner in the works. How is it that Trump did actually support the vaccination program in the end?
Well, what happened is they had control of mainstream media. So here they are saying chloroquine doesn't work. There is no alternative anything. We have to produce a vaccine. So because if they had a therapeutic, they didn't need, or could they produce a vaccine? So when he was out of officially, kind of officially, unofficially out of office, and if he said, oh no, they don't need a vaccine, then they would jump him and say, oh yeah, they do. Look, this doesn't work, that doesn't work. They had control of the media. So he had to push a vaccine. Otherwise, they would have kept this going for decades. They go, oh, well, we're still working on developing a vaccine. Maybe another 5 years, we'll have a vaccine. In the meantime, they're still pushing their stupid agenda. So what he did, okay, we need a vaccine. I'm going to push what I think the safest vaccine. So he goes,
it's
okay.
so hard to know. I mean, listen, I'm not a great Trump supporter. I'm not anti-Trump. I'm just an observer. And I just know that when you really passionately feel something about an agenda, and you think I'm going to really support this, then everything you see supports it. Do you know what I mean? So for me, I just watch. I just see that he's got this interest in the vaccines, and I don't know why. I don't know why.
That's what one of the military representatives said. If he didn't come up with a vaccine, this would have went on for decades.
But they wanted to vaccinate
there is no
everyone.
cure.
No, but they wanted to vaccinate everyone. I mean, there was no question this vaccine was going to roll out globally within 12 months of the coronavirus coming out.
Well, he sped it up. Yeah, he spent a lot of resources because he saw that they had ruled out the chloroquine. Here's Fauci up there saying, "Oh, it's poison, it's killing people, it's no good, it doesn't work." You know, this is the head of the National Health Service in the U.S., completely paid off by the communist Chinese. You know, completely under their control. I don't know why he hasn't been arrested yet. You know, and I think the only reason is there's so many people who believe what he's saying that it would be traumatic if all of a sudden they pulled him and they go, "Oh, you know, now our national health care advisor, Trump is pulling a fast one." So now they've developed all these other vaccines, including this one that has to be kept at minus 80 degrees below zero or something. What kind of vaccine has that? I mean, and people are starting to get sick from it.
Very bad.
So that's what I've been told.
Yeah, okay. So let's go back to, it says here boredom is bad. Okay, the voices will move in quickly if the client or the victim is bored. Is that right?
Well, they get louder when they're ignored. The next one I think was the voices consistently steer their victim away from anything that might generate joy. And look at what the mainstream and the deep state are doing. You know, no amusement parks, no swimming pools, no going to the park, no meeting with your friends, you know, no walking in public, no holding hands, no going anywhere. Stay in your house, stare at the four walls. You're gonna die if you go outside. And if the virus doesn't kill you, we will for walking around and defying our orders. I mean, they go after anything that gives the person any joy whatsoever. You tell me that the deep state and the government isn't doing that over there right now.
Here, we're not allowed to sing. They
Oh my God! What is it going to take to wake people up? What is it going to take? I mean,
Listen,
how stupid are people? How dense are they? What the hell is it going to take? You know, next they're going to say, stick a broomstick up your ass and walk around in the street.
In the winter this year, or was it in the autumn last year? Sometime, I can't remember when, because there's so many different rules, they change every day. But you couldn't sing in a pub. You couldn't have live performance in a pub. You could sit in a pub and have a drink, but you couldn't have a live performance because the singing was bad.
The singing was bad. Anything that brought joy to people.
Do you know what they did? They zoomed people in. People were playing music in their living rooms, in their bands, and zooming it into the pub so that the people in the pub could experience live music. But they weren't allowed to sing in the same room as the pub.
You know what would happen over here if they did that? There's tons of them that would be shot. I'm telling you, if they broke into houses like they did in Canada, there would be a gunfight. You know, we're all armed over here, and they're selling guns at a horrendous rate. But getting ammunition now, if you don't already have ammunition, they have cut that to the max. The Department of what is it? The ones that run FEMA. They've bought like 20 billion rounds of hollow point 9mm ammunition. What are they going to do with that? That's killing ammunition. That's not target practice ammunition. That's ammunition to kill people. They have bought billions of rounds of it to keep it off the market, so we couldn't get it. You can't get gunpowder now. It's hard to find ammunition anywhere. Wow. You know, they've taken it all off the thing. They've shut down factories. They've tried over and over to control guns. They tried to take away assault weapons in California, and they failed. The people have fought that. So if they tried to do that kind of shit over here, they would be shot. And so would the police enforcing that, you know.
Well, crazily, I mean, I live in a very sort of middle class, small town in Essex in the south of England. And here, people just want to, the social, what do you call it, virtue signaling. They just want to comply. They don't want to do anything.
They can't do that. They're being slowly suffocated. I mean, it's like putting a frog in a pot and slowly turning up the heat. And they're going to sit in that pot until they're boiling, and they find out they're no longer free. They're completely controlled by these idiots, and they haven't done anything to fight for their rights. You got to move on that common law stuff, because this is admiralty law that they're functioning with right now.
Mhm.
You know?
I have some, it's probably confidential, so I won't say too much about it, but we have a huge movement of new common law representatives that are going to start pacing, doing the beat, let's put it that way. On the beat means walking up and down like a policeman would. So there is
Good.
something happening. I can't say too much about it because I don't want to ruin the plan, but it's a national thing,
Great,
and
great.
it is going to be fantastic.
Good. You got to fight back. If you don't fight back, they're gonna drive you into the ground. They're gonna take everything you own. You know, that this bull crap of like, oh, you won't own anything, but you will be happy because we'll take care of you. Yeah, they're doing that over here with the unemployment. There's businesses looking for people to go to work, but they won't go because they're getting unemployment from the Democrats. Why should we work when we're making more money sitting around picking our noses?
Well, we have something here called furlough, and it's the same thing. People are being paid to stay at home, and the furlough is due to run out next September. It was due to run out last June. They extended it. They keep extending it. People are happy on furlough. They're happy. They don't have to go to work. They don't have to do anything.
As your economy collapses around your ears.
Yes, exactly. Although I hear recently, because I don't have mainstream media of any description, but I hear from friends saying that the mainstream media is reporting an increase in economic activity. Well, I don't know.
You can't believe anything those fools say.
Absolutely nothing. And we know that once furlough finishes, what we're going to end up with is a UBI, Universal Basic Income. And the only way you can claim it is if you're a good girl or boy.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what they're doing here, you know. So yeah, you look at what you're doing. That this thing, they steer the people away from anything that might generate joy. Yeah. Look at what the deep state, your politicians, the scumbags up there running your country, they're doing the same thing. All these psychotic symptoms fit hand in glove. I mean, it's one-to-one correlation between what the schizophrenics and the psychotics are hearing and what the government is now doing to the people, not only your government, but our government and governments around the world. Look at Miramar, you know.
Yeah. Wow. So what have we got here? So taking joy away, manipulate feeling without speaking. I mean, that is exactly what's happening here. I don't know about with you.
Yeah, over here too.
So tell me a little bit more about that. How's that working with you? The voices can manipulate feeling without speaking.
Well, look what happens. They set up these conditions where you're trapped, and you can't go anywhere. You can't travel. You can't do anything. You can't go to the pub. You can't sing. They don't have to do anything. You know, they've already created those conditions, and you're stuck there. You know, they're no longer speaking to you. They've already created these conditions, and now you're miserable. That's what they want.
Yeah. And the rate of suicide has gone through the roof.
Yes.
Suicide is, just a few months ago in the middle of our lockdown here, a paramedic who I know once removed was saying the only thing they're getting through at the moment was suicides. That was the biggest thing they were having here. Mm-hmm. Which is,
I'm sure
you know, they've set up the conditions like you said, so that you can't enjoy your life. You can't do anything.
And then you listen to the suicide rate, and it's like, you know, they go to the mental health system and they get filled full of these toxic drugs. You know, so it's like, oh yeah, we need help, and they go in there and they give them a chemical lobotomy, you know, shut down their brains, turn them into zombies, and say, yeah, go back home and just don't cause any trouble. Here, take these drugs. And we're not giving them to you free. You got to pay for them, and they cost an awful lot of money. You know.
And of course, then people think that that's the answer, and if they can't afford it, then obviously, you know, they're suffering, aren't they? They're suffering even more because now they feel sorry for themselves because they can't even get the medication. And you think, oh my God, if only you knew the medication's going to make you 100 times worse.
Yeah, so what they do is turn to street drugs, you know, heroin and cocaine and alcohol and all those kind of drugs that the voices love because there's a nasty withdrawal effect and it ruins their lives. So, okay, you can't get the chemical lobotomies psychiatry is giving you, but we can get heroin and we can get alcohol and we can get whatever else we can get from the streets. Mm-hmm. You know, so they're fostering drug addiction. Mm-hmm. I know here it costs about $800 to $1,000 to stay sane on these toxic drugs for a month. You can go across the border to Mexico, get them over the counter for $75 for a month's supply. Same company, you know, only written in Spanish. No prescription necessary. As you know, these are not abusable drugs. Nobody is going to take these things because they enjoy them. They're awful drugs. They don't need to keep control of these things other than to milk people dry, who are the most unfortunate of our number. You know,
you had a statistic.
And most of that comes from insurance companies.
You had a statistic that you sent me about $3.7 billion is made from
a year.
Neuroleptics.
On neuroleptic antipsychotic drugs alone. You know, and they know that they're destroying these people. They know it. So the big pharma is sending all these representatives to all these hospitals, these cute girls dressed in dresses. I've seen it a million times. Free lunches, come and listen to it. You know, and they show all these impressive graphs that there's no way to verify. Psychiatrists aren't doing any research. They're just listening to these bozos that are sending these cute little girls in with all these fancy graphs, where if you check the numbers and they don't pan out. Mm-hmm. It's sick what's going on. It's sick.
Yeah, I gather, Jerry, that you wrote all these before COVID. You wrote all of these. This had nothing. These were just things that you'd identified the patterns way before all of this.
A long time ago. And then I got to thinking about it and listening to the news, and I went, it's the same stuff. It's the same stuff. These are the same entities speaking through these friggin' politicians. Doing the same thing, saying the same thing, only on a mass scale now. You know, and you look at it, it's one for one. It's like, you know, correlation, 1-to-1 correlation. You know, the next one is short circuiting of reason.
Yeah.
I mean, look at what's happening, going on. You know, you can't sing, you can't walk in public, you got to have sex in certain ways that the government, it's nuts, it's insane. You talk about short circuiting of reason, it's the same friggin' thing.
Yeah.
So
I heard another story of a woman who was walking down the road, and somebody jogged, you know, a jogger, a runner, ran past her without a mask on, and she shared on social media how terrified she was and how inconsiderate it was for this jogger to run past her without a mask on.
Yeah, I've had that happen to me. Girl, you know, old women run from me in the store. You know, oh, you don't have a mask on, and you're terrified. You know, it's like you know, yelling at me in the store. Yo, where's your mask? I'm not wearing a mask. Well, you can't wear a mask, and they turn into Nazis. You know, it's like they've got the public working as Nazis for them because of the fear. Yeah. You know, it's just like the friggin' brown shirts again.
It is the brown shirts, the Hitlerjugend. I did German as a degree years ago. So, you know, we it's exactly the same. We've got here something called COVID marshals. They're normal people that have been employed by the state.
Brown shirts.
Yeah, the brown shirts to impose the rules.
They would get shot over here.
Well,
they would get run out with a gun in their face and told to get the hell out of here.
I hope so. Yeah. So I did jump over a page. Sorry, I was kind of overzealous. I went over a page. So now we're on boredom is bad. So. Okay, let's move. Boredom is bad. So that's one of the things that allows them to take over is boredom. When your mind isn't occupied with something else productive, then they can move in and they start inserting all these negative thoughts, you know, and you're bored stiff. So your mind is being, you know, turn on the news and there's all these negative thoughts, and then there's just all this fear and people are dying of COVID and everything is awful and there's no God and you know. So what they're doing is stopping people from being productive. They're forcing boredom on people. You know, stay in your houses, stare at the four walls. You can't go anywhere. You can't do anything. You can't sing. You can't. Yeah, that's exactly what the voices want. Mm-hmm. You know, they want boredom, so they have complete, unobstructed access without any interference. Yeah. So that's one thing I tell schizophrenics is never let themselves get bored. Yeah. You know, because those things will move right in. It's like they'll move right in and they'll fill the void. That's quite interesting because, like, sometimes I know people keep themselves busy because they don't want to look at their trauma.
Yeah.
And
same thing.
It's the same thing, but in a way, if you really want to resolve your trauma, you need to understand it was a long time ago, and it doesn't bear any relevance to you now. It doesn't have to anymore. But I do find a lot of my clients keep themselves super busy because they don't want to look at the trauma.
Yeah, and schizophrenics keep themselves busy because they don't want to be influenced by the voices, and the voices don't like that.
Yeah.
You know, they don't want that trauma to be resolved. They feed off of that trauma. They feed off of the negative emotion that trauma produces. So they will insert situations which will trigger that trauma. You know, so it would generate more negative emotional energy.
Okay, brilliant. So the next one, what's the next one? Oh, this
Well,
is fascinating. Yeah, go on.
Yeah. Well, the voices try to pass themselves off as the person's thoughts, and those thoughts belong to the victim. So from the time we're born, we're taught that all our thoughts belong to us. They're all ours, that we are our thoughts, and that any thought that comes to mind is ours. That is not the truth, ever. You know, there are thoughts that everybody's had that barge into their head that are completely disgusting, that are be illegal, dangerous, stupid, vile, that you would never do, and that you feel that this isn't a part of me, this isn't something I want, and it just gives you the chills and the willies just to think about it, and you're upset because that thought came into your head. You know, that thought didn't come from you. You know, they are inserting these thoughts, and if you ask schizophrenics, they believe that these voices are their thoughts. The first thing you have to do when working with schizophrenics in therapy is to break those thoughts away from the thoughts of the individual. And I've had scores of schizophrenics tell me that they ask the voices, who are you? What are you? And the voices would respond back, we are you. So they want you to believe that these thoughts that come into your head are who you are. You know, they're what you are, and and to try to get you to act on them, which will get you in more trouble and create more trauma and sabotage your life and cause more misery. So if they can fool you into thinking those thoughts are you and they belong to you and you own them and you don't make a distinction, then they're running you. Now they have control. And they start increasing that control.
So if we go back to what's going on now, people come out with the same thing every time. I have very little to do with Joe Public here, but whenever I do, I can speak to one person and they say exactly the same thing as another person. Mm-hmm. In the autumn, I was on the phone to various people who I don't normally speak to. Oh, we've got the vaccine coming. It was like everyone said exactly the same thing.
They're brainwashed.
Yeah. And, you talk to others, it's your fault that, we're still in lockdown. And you think, hang on a sec, these are programmed thoughts. They're not your thoughts. Your thoughts, if you could really, reach into your heart and soul and say, what am I thinking? These thoughts have been programmed into you. They're not yours.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. They're programmed in by mainstream media. This is the truth. We wouldn't lie to you. The liars of liars are telling everybody they wouldn't lie. Yeah. And as long as people keep going along with this, they're going to get crushed. They're going to get completely crushed. You have to stand up and fight back.
Yeah. Okay. So I like this one as well. Your next one, number 25. What would you?
Well, selective forgetting. Like I was saying earlier, the voices take control and they're almost like in a hypnotic state. And when they snap out of it, they don't remember what they did while they were in that psychotic state. They don't remember how bad it was when they were in that psychotic state. They don't remember who they hurt. They don't remember what they did. It's. Yeah. I was experimenting once with with selective memory, because patients at the state hospital would tell me that they couldn't remember anything they read in the Bible or in their spiritual works, but they could remember everything they read virtually from a murder mystery or a horror story or something like that. So I went, well, that's interesting. Let me check that out, because I never took their word for it just up. If I could check it out, I would. So I got a passage out of the Bible, and I got a passage out of a murder book, which were about the same size. And I gave them the one and had them write down everything they could remember about the Bible verse. And then I took that away and gave them the murder mystery paragraph. Let them read it and asked them to write down everything they could remember from that. They remembered 4 times as much from the murder mystery as they did the Bible verse. And that was consistent.
Oh, no. Yeah. So we're looking at selective forgetting. That's what you're talking about, isn't it? That you remember certain things and forget others. I don't know why I keep jumping over, but anyway, I remember, this is what happened to me, and we may have covered it last time we spoke, but I went to meet an old college friend who was in the same year that I was at when I was 23, when I became schizophrenic. And I went to meet this man, and I hadn't seen him for 26 years. And when we sat down and had a meal together in London, I was thinking, what have we got to talk about? It was a long time ago, and he was quite cagey, didn't want to speak too much. And I'm thinking, what's going on here? It was later on in the evening he revealed to me that he and I had a relationship, and I said, no, you must be joking. And he was devastated, obviously, because you
didn't remember.
I couldn't remember a thing. I could not remember anything at all. And what subsequently happened was we spent about 12 weekends, literally consecutive weekends, because he lived up north and I lived down here. And we met specifically to track through what happened to me that I couldn't remember. And it was absolutely devastating and shocking, because as we started to track back on the memories, I started to feel it. I couldn't remember the thinking was gone, but I started to remember what it felt like. And then the pictures came, and I could then remember what had happened. But not because I'd stored it in any kind of cognitive sense. I'd stored it in pictures and feelings. That was the only way I could access it. So yeah, selective forgetting. I mean, there was masses of my experience that I'd forgotten. I can remember, not all of it, I'm sure, but I can remember more now because I've had this kind friend share with me what happened to me, because I couldn't remember it.
Yeah, you weren't in the driver's seat then.
No.
Yeah, you were being run by them. Just like, when all this information comes out about what these scum are doing, the child trafficking, the child torture, the adrenochrome, even Google's Adrena is an operating system for Microsoft. Chrome, so you got adrenochrome with Google. It's gonna hit people like a ton of bricks. It's gonna be the same devastating thing. All this has been going on, all this child trafficking, the tunnels under the White House, the millions of kids. There's 800,000 children disappear in the US every year. 800,000 disappear, just completely disappear. And nothing has been done about it until just recently, where Trump started arresting these people and going after them. Other than that, it was like, oh, sorry, your kid disappeared. We can't find him. But sorry about that. If he shows up, we'll tell you. It's sick what's been going on. So it's going to be that same kind of trauma when they come out with all this information about what these scum have been doing to us, and what the central bank has been doing to us, and the Rothschilds have been doing to us, and the government has been doing to us. It's going to be that same kind of trauma. People are going to be boom.
Did you know, Jerry? I mean, this is something I've been studying in the last few years, but did you know, certainly in this country, and I think it's probably global, that whenever you are registered your birth to the state, you actually hand over ownership of your person or your fiction to the state, and the state trades you as a stock on the stock market.
Yes, I've heard that.
You are traded.
Yep.
And you are worth about £500 million to the global elite, because they guesstimate that your lifespan is going to produce that amount of money, so they trade on your birth certificate.
I knew that's come out.
Yeah.
So it's stuff like that. So it's going to, people, when they wake up and they see the horror of what has been going on and that they've been clueless, it's going to be that same kind of shock that you experienced with your friend.
Yeah.
You know, be like, I didn't even know this. I mean, I saw traces of it, but I didn't want to see it. And it's going to be that same kind of shock. So they're trying to expose it bit by bit by bit, so it just doesn't overwhelm everybody. But it's coming out, it's gushing out now. I mean, it's just gushing out. But the mainstream media is doing everything they can to shut it down. The only way to get at it is with the alternative media. You know,
but so, even on alt media, I mean, when before Trump was voted out, on alt media, we were getting loads of stuff from the States. I mean, there was so much coming over from the US. And my experience of alt media at the moment is we're getting very little about America at the moment. That's my experience. I mean, I might not be plugged into the right platforms, but I'm seeing a lot less, let's put it that way, a lot less than I was seeing
they're cutting
year.
you off. And I've been doing my best to feed information over there to Australia and to England and Germany and yeah, because the mainstream, your mainstream, your CNN, your BBC is just as bad as our CNN.
The BBC
they don't want anything because there's a huge rebellion going on over here right now. I mean, it's a huge rebellion. We're going to take this country back, you know, and we're doing it as fast as we can without shocking the crap out of people. But they don't want you guys to see that. They don't want these ideas coming to you. So I'll add you to my list and start feeding you.
I mean, you do send me stuff. I've just deactivated my Facebook account, but yeah, I've seen quite a bit that you've brought through. I can't say I click on every single one and have a look at everything, but
take it. Yeah, the way I do it is kind of like by feel.
Yeah.
You know, because it's hard to verify a lot of this.
Yeah.
You know, because they don't want it out. They don't want it out.
Mm-hmm. I know. So let's go on. So the filling, am I on the right one now? We're on 24, not 25.
Right.
Fill the victim's mind with negative thoughts about self and others. I mean, that is most definitely going on.
Right. You look at the advertisements. Uses deodorant, you stink. Your health is bad. Eat these pills. You know, you're dying from this disease. Look at the crap that they're feeding you. I mean, look at it. You know, it's all negative and about yourself and everybody else. You know, look at the news. It's all negative stuff. Look at what these people are doing over here. I mean, this is evil. It's all the same thing. It's bit by bit. Step by step, it's all the same stuff that the psychotics are hearing, that they call schizophrenics and psychotics. It's what the governments are doing right now to us.
That's the war, isn't it? It's between the people and the government and the elite. That's what's going on.
And what it is, it's good against evil.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an epic battle, and people are waking up now in incredible numbers. If they could just get that stranglehold of the mainstream media off their necks. But you know, all the YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and all. I mean, if you put anything up that they don't disagree with, man, you're gone. You know, you got to be real careful about what you put up over here. And the alternative media broadcasters they leave out certain words. You know, they'll read something and they'll go blankety blank, and then, you know, I can't say those words, and blankety blank, and I can't say those words, but you can fill in the blanks.
Yeah.
You know, so that's how they're operating now, especially with YouTube.
So, I mean, you said 23 originally, but we're going over to 29. So are these ones are these all in your book? This one,
No, matter of fact, they'll be, if we update the copy, they would be, but they're not now.
So these are sort of extra ones that you've realised this is what's actually happening.
Well, this was, I realized all this before I ever wrote the book. And it was just like, see, if psychiatry can't push their falsity that the voices are hallucinations, then what are they treating? They say it's a chemical imbalance of the brain. There is no such thing. There is no genetic anything ever been found. It isn't a disease. They want it to be a disease. They're pushing it as hard as they can so they can sell these toxic meds. You know, but if they run patterns, then they can't be a hallucination. And that leaves the question is, what is the psychiatric mafia treating? What are these meds for if they don't cure anything, if they don't help anything, if they make things worse? What, it exposes them, and they're like, the emperor has no clothes. And the drug companies don't want that to happen. So they're, the psychiatric mafia are the drug pushers for the big pharma, who are poisoning these people with their toxic drugs.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about the shuffle. I remember being in a shuffle. I remember my hands being like, they were like huge plates of bananas, and I didn't have any motor control over things. Everything was too small for my hands, I had no motor control. And I remember, I think they put me on, when I first went in there, I think they put me on Largactil, which paralysed my body. It just paralysed my body. It didn't stop the thinking. The thoughts were still wild. But I remember my body being completely paralysed. I could barely shuttle.
Yeah, they didn't want you causing any problems.
Yeah, they didn't want me.
That's what they do in those places. It's like, we keep them under control. And when I first started at the mental hospital, they were using ECT. And it was very crude. I mean, I watched one, and I got a pretty strong stomach, but I almost fainted. After I watched that, it was just absolutely horrible. And then, and the people who controlled that weren't the doctors, it were the attendants on the wards. They would tell the psychiatrist, hey man, this guy's causing a lot of problems. We think he needs another treatment. And even one of those, the neurologist could track the amount of neurological damage to the brain of even one of those treatments. And here they were admitting 1,300 of them a year at that state hospital where I worked. 1,300. And I watched the effect. After they got hit with that, they walk out of there and they're like, and they stay that way for about a week and a half, and they don't cause any problems because they're like numb and they forgot everything, and their short-term memory's gone, and they're walking around in a daze and not causing any problems. Then when they come to and they start getting agitated, oh well, we think he needs another shock treatment. Bring one in here and zap him again. It was for control. It wasn't for treatment. They weren't making these people any better. They were making them worse.
So Jerry, so point 25 was the destruction of positive self-concept. I'm in line now with all your handouts here. So tell us about that. The voices will consistently attempt to convince their victims they're stupid.
Well, they're stupid, they're ugly, they're worthless, they're unlovable, they're a burden on others. I mean, I don't know how many times I've heard, you're just a drain on others, you're stupid, you're ugly, why don't you just kill yourself? Over and over and over again, trying to get them to kill themselves. And schizophrenics have a suicide rate 3 to 5 times higher than the normal population. But what's extremely interesting is so do psychiatrists.
Yeah.
The suicide rate for psychiatrists and schizophrenics is almost identical. The attack rate upon psychiatrists is higher than virtually any other doctor by their patients. And so they're constantly putting down your self-concept. You can't do this, you're stupid, you're ugly. I mean, we have lists of the negative things that these voices tell them about themselves. Nobody likes you, nobody will listen to you. They're just faking like they like you. Lie after lie after lie after lie after lie. Anything that the voices tell you that's negative about yourself or anybody else, that's the voices talking. So when the media is telling you lies about other people doing all these horrible things, and lies about, hey, you're bad if you don't do this stuff, you don't listen to what we say, it's the same thing.
Yeah, of course it is, because you sometimes you can feel it, can't you, when you're out, if you've not got a mask on. It's like, oh, how dare you, you're so selfish.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right. And I'd have to brace myself. I mean, I'd get thrown out of one store, and then I'd go for a couple of weeks not even going to the store, sending my wife in the store until I built up for another kind of, okay, I'm going to go into this store, I'm going to get thrown out, and just brace myself for it.
Yeah.
And then some stores didn't do anything. You know, like the auto parts store, I went through there, they didn't say anything. There were some stores that didn't say anything, but most of them, you could see the Nazi come out in them. It's like all of a sudden they have this authority, you know. It's like Costco was a big one. You know, how dare you come to Costco without a mask? Get out of here. Got attacked in the back. And then as they're going through the counter, what are you doing in our store without a mask? Blah, 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 blah. I'm like, you know.
It's like the world is full of Agent Smiths, isn't it? Everywhere you go, suddenly an Agent Smith comes up. And
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Oh
Right.
my God, where's the next one coming from?
Here's the brown shirt and everybody coming out, you know. It's like, yeah, I got tired of getting thrown out of stores. I had to take a break between getting thrown out of stores.
I can relate to that because it is quite traumatic because it's confrontational.
Yeah.
And, you know, I don't want to confront with people. I just want to get on with my life, you know?
Yeah, I didn't either, but it's like, okay, you know, and I had, like I said, I had to take a break in between and then work myself up. And I said, okay, I'm going to go into Costco without a mask, you know, but I had to put it on to get past the guards at the front. But once I got in there, I took it off. And I never got through Costco without getting thrown out.
Oh my God. Okay, so I like this one as well. They'll attempt to pull their victim away from consensual reality.
Right. So you just had that, you know, with that experience. So you can address that.
Yeah. So which experience? The one with the
with the boyfriend you had that you.
Oh yeah. Yeah, the one that said we'd had a relationship and I'd completely forgotten about it. Right. Yeah, I mean, yeah, to the point where, seriously, 26 years passed before I met him again and he was able to refresh my memory. I was absolutely consternated. I could not believe that I'd forgotten about 4 months of my life. To the point where I didn't even know it was missing. I didn't even know it was missing. Until I met him again, you know.
See, and that wasn't your normal state of reality. And that's what they do. They go bit by bit, you know, they go, that person's looking at you. That person's watching you. Or the government's watching you. Or they're sending these thoughts into your head. You know, the government is doing this. So bit by bit, they start pulling you away from your normal reality and start poisoning it with these negative thoughts that generate negative emotion, which they then suck off. You know.
I mean, for them to target people, these voices, these entities, they must be looking for traumatized people. They are looking for people who...
They're like sharks in the ocean. They can smell the blood. You know, so negative people, traumatized people, you know, when I first started working with schizophrenics, I'm like, well, why did they do these things? You know, how were they raised? Or this is horrible they did to their kids. In the prison, I didn't look at their record unless I had to, you know, because I knew it would bias my thinking, and I just wanted to treat them like, you know, regular people. Yeah. But the times I did have to look in, what was done to them was horrific sexual and physical and emotional abuse. I mean, just horrific abuse. They were burned. They were locked into closets. They were tortured. They were beat up. They came close to being murdered. I mean, it was like, so that perpetuates itself. That mental state perpetuates itself. Mm-hmm. And they've done that to their kids now. They've done that to people they know now. They've treated them how they were treated.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, they go after the wounded.
They do.
You know, but they hit us all. Don't think anybody on this planet's going to get away. They're going to hit us all to some degree. You know.
Yeah.
I
think in my case, I was just one of these. And I still am. I was just one of these people that was. I never accepted the consensus reality. I could not accept it. It just seemed ludicrous to me, even when I was young. I railed against it. I hated it. I didn't like it. But as a result, I was conditioned and you know, controlled and told to behave and, you know, don't be stupid, don't do that, that's bad, etc. So I was constantly criticised for being a free spirit. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where my trauma came from, because then, of course, instead of my family and extended friends and whatnot criticising me, the voices took over.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they
Yeah,
took over where other
where
people
they
left
left
off.
off.
You know,
Right. And you look at what the educational system has done. Look at how many years of brainwashing and that I had to go through to get access to a clinical population. You know, it was like a 4 years of undergraduate and 2 years of graduate school before I could even access a clinical population. And 2 more years in the PhD program. And you, the whole time in all the psychiatric institutions I worked at, I never, ever saw any researchers in there searching for answers. None. There wasn't any. You can't just walk in there and go, hey, I want to do research on schizophrenics. You know, I want to find out what the voices are saying to them. I need access to this population. No, they won't let you in. They got it sealed off. The mainstream psychiatrists and psychologists and medical profession will not allow access. Researchers can't go in there and start asking questions. They have to determine you're significantly brainwashed before they will allow you access. And I was like you. I was a rebel. I never trusted authority ever. And then when I saw the lies that I started running into in graduate school, you know, it's like, hey, wait a minute, that's not what a schizophrenic is like. That's not what a bipolar is like. What are you talking about? And then I went and checked in their backgrounds. Hardly any of them had any clinical experience except working with students or you know, student counseling center. They had no frontline experience with these things. They didn't work in psychiatric hospitals. They were academics, and some of them just went from, you know, BA to master's to PhD without having any clinical experience. It was insane what they're doing. You know, I mean, the bull crap that they're teaching people, you know, and then they give you their stamp of approval, and then you get in there and you actually see what's going on, and you go, hey, wait a minute, that doesn't match the reality of what I'm seeing. You know, and then you speak out about it and you get crushed. So there were years and years and years where I thought I was going insane because I had nobody to talk to who understood except the psychotics themselves. I could talk to them, you know, they understood. We understood each other, the group of schizophrenics I was working with, we all understood.
It's so fascinating because you're a clinical psychologist and you understand the schizophrenics, and like, you know, at one point you must have thought, well, if I understand them, I must be like them. Maybe,
exactly.
You know,
I thought I was going nuts. You know, and then when they started recovering and I started getting crushed in my bed at night, you know, and all this weird stuff was happening, the walls would crackle in my office. You know, prisoners would tell me, hey, you know what you're doing is dangerous, don't you? I mean, you know, and I couldn't talk to my wife. I mean, she said, you shouldn't be picking in their heads, man, this, that. There's nobody I could talk to until I met Sherry Sweeney, the co-author of my book. And I'd known her for 10 years before she told me what you just did, that you heard the voices. 10 years I knew her. And then one day I'm telling her about an interesting case that I had at the prison. And she goes, yeah, I know all about that. I heard voices when I was a kid. And she's one of the most spiritual people I know. And I'm like, what? It just did not compute. You know, it's like, whoa, what? You went 10 years, you didn't tell me this. You knew I was researching this stuff. And now you tell me at 10 years after I'd known you, you know? Well, and then I could talk to her about it, you know? And then we started comparing notes. And it was like, whoa, you know, so she was the first sane person I could talk to about this stuff. But for years I thought, well, hey, I'm losing, man, I'm going crazy too. And I read about, who was it, Lang, or one of the researchers who was doing research on schizophrenia. And he started getting a little bit wacky, you know, toward the end of his thing. And I'm going, does the same thing happen to me that happened to him? I thought I was going crazy. Especially when, you know, I have a prisoner in my office who's schizophrenic and the walls start cracking.
Yeah,
you know,
I
like
remember that story.
Oh.
That's incredible. Did you ever come across Rosenhan's experiment in 1973?
No.
This is just sort of like classic of how psychiatrists see what they want to see. There's no, it's very subjective, and you and I know all about projection, and we all know about counter what is it called?
Transference.
Transference and projection. We know all about that, but the psychiatrists don't. They don't know about that. So in 1973, a guy called Rosenhan in the States, he sent, let's say, for argument's sake, I don't remember the number now, but a dozen stooges to various psychiatric institutions around the US with the instruction, just go in and tell them that you can hear the word thud. It was called thud, as in thud, like a you know, a noise, thud. It was called the thud experiment. And so they all went to these various hospitals. They
They
said,
got locked up.
yeah, I can hear the word thud. So they locked them all up. They diagnosed them all with schizophrenia. One went in with bipolar, or at the time it was manic depression. And when they were in, their instructions from Rosenhan was to identify what was going on. All the inmates said to them, you're not ill. There's nothing wrong with you. What are you doing? They knew, right? So they would take notes about what was going on in the hospital, and the psychiatrist would say, strange note-taking behaviour. Now, so after so many months of them being in there, they tried to get out, and they couldn't get out. Because no matter what they did, that was seen to be another phase of their psychosis. So in the end, Rosenhan had to spring them out. He had to go and report and say, look, you've got this client, they're one of my researchers, you're going to have to let them go. It was an experiment. Well, the American Psychiatric Association
went nuts.
Went mad.
Yeah, because they're being exposed. They're being exposed.
So what happened then was they said, right, send us more and we'll tell you exactly who they are. So 3 months later, they came back and they said, right, we know exactly who they are. It's this person, that person, this person. Rosenhan said, I haven't sent you anyone. I haven't sent you anyone. And again, they were outraged because they see what they want to see.
Yeah, they're programmed by the educational institutions who are paid off by, you know, the deep state.
Yeah.
I mean, they were taken over in the 1930s by Rockefellers, saying you either teach pharmaceutical medicine or you don't get a medical degree. We won't support your institutions. So they're completely taken over. The medical society here, the AMA, is completely run by insurance companies and the big pharma and the education. So they control the educational institutions. You know, so they're brainwashed like they tried to brainwash me. And they believe what they were taught because you don't challenge authority. And I'll tell you, the higher up off the line I went when I was in the PhD program, if you asked too many questions and they thought that you were challenging, you're in big trouble. And I was always in trouble with them. You know?
Yes.
I was always in trouble. There was
Long live the revolution. So where are we now? Should we run through to the last few? Or
well, 27 is one that I think you'll understand because it fits right in with the hypnosis. So what the voices do is they create a lot of confusion. And, you know, confusion isn't comfortable. So the person wants to end that state as soon as possible. So then they throw in a suggestion. If you do this, that's the direction that'll end this confusion. Yeah. They're masters at that. And you could probably explain that better than I could.
Well, what we do with hypnosis is we confuse the conscious mind, because once the conscious mind gets confused, the unconscious mind will accept anything. So if I confuse your conscious mind and I say to you, you can be relaxed or tense or happy, it doesn't matter what. You're thinking, well, what's the instruction? Have I got to be relaxed? Have I got to be tense? Have I got to be happy? What's the instruction? And eventually the mind says, well, I don't know what the instruction is. I'll just relax. I don't know. I'll just open up my unconscious to any suggestions. So once you've got the conscious mind confused about the instructions, then you can go in and make a suggestion. And
that's what they do.
And that's exactly what they're doing. They're issuing different rules every day, every other week, something's different. And so while everyone's going, well, I've got no idea what's going on, they slip in, well, I tell you what, how you're going to get out of this is you just get the jab.
And look at what the mainstream media is doing. Look at what the government's doing. You know, they're changing people are so confused. Oh, well, is this true? Is that true? You don't know what to believe anymore. It's a mass state of confusion. And then they inject all this bullcrap that they want you to have. I mean, it's the same kind of stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
We already kind of covered aversion to everything positive or beautiful. They don't want none of that.
Absolutely.
But another thing that's, the last one, 29, is any attempt to inform the schizophrenic patient that the voices are energetic parasites, just like with your experiment in the mental hospital. you know, where psychiatry went nuts when they did that. You go to expose the truth and they go crazy. It's the same exact thing, just like this guy who sent these people to the mental hospitals and okay, this is the truth, this is what happened, and they go nuts. The same thing with the voices. You know, when you expose the truth, they go crazy and they go instantly, they go off, just boom, they explode. You know, just like what's happening now, they expose the truth and they just attack it vehemently. They throw everything at it but the kitchen sink.
That's right.
That's what's going on right now.
I mean, what's going to happen next, I'm quite certain, is that once the scariants start killing or maiming some of the vaccinated, they're going to start blaming the unvaccinated. And because people are so primed for it, you know, they're going to say, what they won't be seeing is that the variants are actually killing those that have been vaccinated.
Now they're coming up with variants now, so it's keep it going. You know,
going.
It's this variant, it's that variant. This variant is more dangerous and it's more lethal than that other variant. You know, and you look at the actual recovery rate is 99.9% without anything that these people recover. This is all a psychological psyops bullcrap.
Yeah. I even spoke to a woman today who I don't know at all on the phone, and she said to me, "Oh, I had COVID in October," and she said, "But I was absolutely fine. All of my friends and family were saying, oh, I thought you'd be on an iron lung. I thought you'd be in, you know, on a ventilator. Are you okay?" And she said, "Yeah, it was fine." I said, "So how did you know it was COVID then?" She said, "Well, I had a test." I said, "Oh."
Oh, with the rate where they keep it running a million cycles until they're sure you have it.
Right.
But the biggest, most dangerous scam is, it has no symptoms. You got COVID, but there's no symptoms. I mean, my God, what is it going to take to wake people up? What is it going to take?
I know, Jerry, I feel your pain. I really feel your pain. It is so exasperating. The one thing I wanted to sort of like almost close with really is that what we've been talking about really is demonic possession of people at their weakest psychological and spiritual points, where they don't have the defenses to understand how they can separate these demonic entities from their being as human beings. So they are possessed, demonic possession, essentially. Now we know this went out, you know, with the advent of science and the separation of the soul and the body, went out a long, long time ago. But you're bringing these things together, and one of the things that have come up again and again is this concept of jinn or archon, this kind of energy, this parasitic energy. Now, anyone who's anyone in the truth movement, as we know, understands that what we're facing is this parasitic energy that is sucking the life out of humanity and feeding on the trauma and devastation that is being caused by the shocking headlines, the terrible manipulation of public consciousness, etc., etc. So tell us a little bit about what you understand about the jinn and the archons. And I mean, I've known about them for not very long, really, in the scheme of things, maybe 6 or 7 years, but...
Well, I was kind of late to the archons. I thought they were space people or something until one day I did an interview with James Bartley and Sherry Sweeney, and they started calling these things the archons, and they had the same fingerprint. I mean, I was talking about voices and evil spirits, and they were talking about archons, and they're the same thing. You know, now you can go several levels up to the Rothschilds, and then beyond the Rothschilds, you know, to the evil spirits and Satan. But this is a battle between good and evil. And you might ask, well, okay, how do I tell? How do I tell my thoughts from their thoughts? Well, number one, any thought that comes into your mind that it's negative about yourself or anybody else, it's them putting it in there. Right? The second way to know is by intent. When these things are telling you to do something, and you know it's going to get you in trouble, or you know it's dangerous, you have to ask yourself, is that my intention? Is it my intent? You know, and I've used that with the prisoners who were hearing voices all the time. They were listening to their voices. They did something that got them thrown into prison. And I'd ask them, was it your intention to get thrown into prison? Was this your intention to hurt that guy? Was it your intention to rob that store? Was it your intention to commit this crime? And they go, no. And I go, well, then whose was it?
Yeah. So the parasitic entity is feeding you with ideas that they want you to do something.
Yes.
And the only reason that they can even have airspace in your psyche is because there's a weakness, a trauma, something that they're
Well,
latching into.
that's one of that's going to give them traction. But what allows them access is the widespread belief that all your thoughts are your own. People believe that. They go, well, where do they come from? Nobody knows where they come from except for Manuel Swedenborg, the Christian mystic 700 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, uh, there's been no research on where thoughts come from. Now, what was interesting is they did put an EEG machine on a schizophrenic, and they watched what happened when they started hearing the voices. And they saw an electrical discharge on the EEG machine a split second before that thought came into their heads. So it's almost like a portal, you know. Wow. So with the mind being a radio set that's set to a different frequency. And if you look at all these things that we just mentioned are all low frequency stuff. So what these things want, they want to turn you down to a low frequency. They can't stand the high frequencies. And that's exactly what the government and the deep state are doing now. They're forcing that knob to be turned to a low frequency.
It's really fascinating because I don't know if you've come across James Redfield's book, The Secret of Shambhala, but it's an amazing odyssey. It's a journey up to Shambhala, which is this kind of like mythical place in the Tibetan mountains. But once up there, the protagonist meets a group of people who do not need telephones or writing to communicate with each other because their thoughts are outside of their head and they can pick up the energy of other people just by being in the same vicinity of them. They can feel what they're thinking and feeling. And this also ties in with Rupert Sheldrake, who wrote a book, put it on the shelf.
The 100th Monkey stuff.
Him, yeah, and The Science Delusion, which he also published, and I interviewed him actually a few years ago. But he says that there's morphic resonance, that whatever happens on one side of the planet will actually start to happen on the other. So how does that communicate? There's something going on beyond the body, beyond the unit that we think we're so separate from everybody else, and we're just not.
Morphogenetic field.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like what this broadcast is going to go out there in the universe, and it's going to start changing the morphogenetic field. You know, people are going to start waking up, saying that, hey, psychosis and what they're doing is the same thing. The deep state is a bunch of psychotic buzzards that are lunatics, and they're imposing their will on us, and we're not going to stand for it.
Amazing. I mean, it always inspires me to consider that even my little resistance here and, you know, my little network here, which is quite big, it's growing, it's getting quite big, that we have that power to transform.
Yes, one by one.
One by one.
There's an awful lot of us, and there's very few of them, maybe 3,000 of them. You know, we give them their power by submitting to their bullcrap. You know, So really, all of those people that we're fighting, i.e., you know, the drones, the people that think they've all been programmed by the state, really, because it's not their thoughts, they actually lack a lot of power because they're the thoughts of these 3,000 people at the top. Right.
So in many ways, because we're free and independent, we are more powerful than all of those drones put together. I'm sorry to call people that haven't woken yet. I don't mean to be unkind, but when you're being programmed by propaganda and you can't see through it.
And there's some people that will never see through it. They're like the never Trumpers. It doesn't matter what he's done or how much good he's done. Well, I don't like him because he's crude. He just doesn't try to sugarcoat anything. He just tells things the way they are. You know, he's not like a good politician. You know, what you see is what you get with him, which is refreshing, even though it might be a little rough at times. What you see is what you get. He ain't pulling no punches. He ain't telling no lies. He ain't trying to scam anybody.
Do you know my acid test of watching of politicians is if you watch them speak and you turn the sound off, just watch them. and see how you feel when you listen to them, just watching their movements. And when I've listened to Trump, whether I like him or not, I'm not Trumpist nor non-Trumpist, but when I watch his movements, he's very real. He's a very real person.
Very real.
When I watch the movements of Matt Hancock, who is fondly is not the right word, but let's say insultingly called Matt Wancock. You probably know what that word means in English, wanker. It's not. It's an unusual. You never heard that word?
No, that's a new one on me.
It's a new. A lot of Americans don't know it, but basically, it's a man who like enjoys himself on his own.
Okay.
But we call. But if you listen to Matt Hancock without the sound on, all you can see is lies, lies, lies. You just hear lies constantly. Just by looking at his face, his body language, he is lying. And he knows he's lying. This isn't, oh, I think I'm right now because I've been given this instruction. He knows he is deliberately deceiving people. And you can see it.
Well, that's like Biden. That's like Obama. They're all liars. And it comes out and it's like, oh, so what? We got away with it. What are you going to do about it? You're just one guy. Just take it and go away. Shut up. People are waking up. They're waking up. That's a mass awakening right now, and you're part of it.
Yeah. Well, your work couldn't be more relevant now. I mean, it's just there's so many wonderful books that have come out in the last few months that are so worth reading. Yours being one of them. Remind us what the title is, Jerry. I've got it written down here.
Let me throw it up here again.
Yeah. All right. An amazing journey into the psychotic mind.
And this will tell you what psychiatry has been doing historically. They've been destroying people for hundreds of years now. They don't know what causes schizophrenia. They don't know anything about the mind. They don't know how to cure it. They don't know how to treat it. They don't know what it is. And they've fooled everybody into thinking that they're the experts. They've got 300 some diagnoses now, and they just keep adding more. All those diagnoses in the DSM-5 are all made up, every single one of them. There is not one clinical test anywhere that will validate any of those diagnoses. None. There is no test. There is no EKG. There's no EJ. There's no nothing. There's no test to verify any of those diagnoses. They were all made up by a board, 3/4 of which are controlled by the pharmaceutical industry. And they just kept adding. They had mental retardation was a mental illness at one time. I think they had Southern Bell syndrome in there. It's all kinds of ridiculous stuff. And then the pharmaceutical industry comes up behind and goes, well, if you have these symptoms, we got this wonderful drug that you can take. And then 6 months later, they're being sued for this toxic drug they put out.
Oh, where would we be without you, Jerry? Because, for me, it's just so wonderful to connect with people who've got their own mind. Not that you haven't. Do you know what I mean? You've worked it all out for yourself, and it's just, it's just phenomenal. It's just so amazing. It's so such a privilege, actually. To talk to you.
Thank you. I'm not sure I deserve it. I'm just a beat-up therapist that's been on the front lines for way too long. And I couldn't say anything because they would fire me. I mean, I've been threatened.
Your role now is as elder. You're the elder. You are the one that knows what other people don't dare discover. So,
Well, they had their chance. I worked shoulder to shoulder to psychiatry for decades and never got locked up. They had their chance to lock me up, based on, and I wouldn't talk to them about any of this. I couldn't talk to anybody I worked with about this stuff.
Well, I'm glad you've spoken to us. So, listen, I'm going to leave it there and stay on the line for a moment. And, I'll put this out and let's hope, hundreds of thousands of people see it. Okay.
Great.
Thanks for joining.